We're in the Mamer of Basi, Ligani, Tafshin Chav Gimel, in the middle of Eis Beis. We're holding where it says V'yuvan, B'tais V'sbir, Alpi, Teiris Abal Shem Tov. Right? Okay, so the Rebbe is going to explain deeper and better and geschmacker, according to the Baal Shem Tov's Pshat here, what's the Chiddush of Eirin Soif, Lamata Din Tachlis, that, so the Friedrich Rebbe says in the Mamer, there's no Pele that Eirin Soif is revealed and is accepted, both revealed and accepted, in Eilam Misa Ein Soif or in Eilam Atzilus. That's not a Chiddush. Where's the Chiddush? Dafke in Eilam Biyah. So what is the exact definition of the difference between the higher worlds? Then over there it's not a Chiddush. And Dafke in Biyah is a Chiddush. So that the Rebbe will explain according to the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, so get ready for some different ICS Kabbalah here, but it's not so complicated. It looks, let's see. Yuvan b'taisus bir al pitayres Baal Shem Tov shenimsara yidei Rav Magid bar Teire. So there's a vart of the Baal Shem Tov that was given over through the Magid in the Sefer Teire. The Pirish HaKosiv explaining what the pasuk means when it says Tsoyar Tasa la Teva Goymer, you should make a Tsoyar for the Teva, which either means a window or it means a Even Teva, to have a precious gem that shines. And then the pasuk says that what is the Teva itself consist of? Tachtiyim, the bottom floor, Shniyim, the second floor, and Shlishiyim, the third floor. Tasa. You should build the Teva. So Kefi Shehuva v'nizbaira al yedei Admor HaZaken. So this vart that it will be quoted here from the Baal Shem Tov is also quoted and explained by the Alter Rebbe. V'nitvasa b'Likutei Torah legimel Parshias. This is printed in a sefer called Likutei Torah legimel Parshias. I'm not sure if it's. I don't think this sefer in itself is still in print or available. This was a sefer that was printed that the Rebbe Marash actually prepared and put together to print. It was printed after the Histalkus of the Rebbe Marash, but then later all those Maimonim were printed in Oira Torah. Okay, so over there he says as follows. B'Shalah Pirish, the Shalah explained what is the significance of the three floors of the Teva. Beruchnius, what does it represent, Beruchnius? So he says, Shetachtim, Shniyim, Shlishim, these three floors, Heim Biyah, corresponds to the three worlds of Bria, Yitzira, and Asiyah. That's what the Teva is. Bar Teirip ma Magid Nishma Seiden Pirish, Ba'oimik Yaiser, B'Shem Baal Shem Tov. Then our Torah, the Magid brings from the Baal Shem Tov a deeper pshat of what Tachtiyim, Shniyim, and Shlishim means. She Tachtiyim, Shniyim, Shlishim, Heim, Gimel HaBechinis, it corresponds to three levels, Oilamis, Neshamis, Velikos. So the Tachtiyim refers to Oilamis, and the Shniyim is Neshamis, and the Shlishim is Elikos. Okay, now, how that... how this fits into Tachtiyim, Shniyim, Shlishim, what? No, that's not what I meant to say. What exactly are Eilamis, Neshamis, and Elikos connecting to? I mean, l'chayre, if you just read these words here, Eilamis, Neshamis, and Elikos are three completely different aspects that are not like layers, one on top of the other. When you talk about Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, so Bria is the higher world, then following Yitzira, and following is Asiyah. When you talk about Eilamis, Neshamis, and Elikos, how does that fit into this Seder of Tachtiyim, Shniyim, Shlishim?
Usually it's El Neshama and Nefesh.
Yeah, be that correct? No, this is a different Indian. Eilamis, Neshamis, and Elikos.
Elikos is a completely different category.
Correct, that's what it would seem like. Yeah, so the Rebbe will explain this. But first, before we go weiter, what you see right away is the Rebbe uses the Lashon here that this is Ba'oimik Yaiser. This is a deeper pshat. Because when you explain that the three floors of the Teva, Tachtiyim, Shniyim, Shlishim, refers to Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, what is the point we're trying to say here? That the three floors of the Teva, just like Begashmius, they all had different purposes and they were very different, very distinct. Like the bottom floor was for the garbage, the middle floor for the animals, the top floor for the human beings. So they're very different. So to Beruchnius, there's Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, meaning that these are three distinct worlds that are represented in these three floors. Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah. According to the Baal Shem Tov, the difference between the three floors is much greater. As much as there is a difference between Bria, Yitzira, and Asiyah, and therefore they're called three different worlds, but they're still Biyah, is always placed into the same category. As we'll see soon, the Rebbe will say, Biyah is, before in the Friedrich Rebbe's Mamer as well, Biyah is a category for itself. So really, generally speaking, Biyah is one floor. It's one inyan. According to the Baal Shem Tov, Eilamis, Neshamis, and Elokos are three completely distinct levels, three completely different things. And that's why it's much deeper, the difference between Tachtiyim, Shniyim, and Shlishiyim. That's the Pashto Pshat of L'chayre. Rebbe adds, Shal Zeh Amru B'Zoya. Regarding this distinction that the Baal Shem Tov says, or maybe it's going back on the Lashon of the Pasik, Tachtiyim, Shniyim, Shlishiyim. So the Zoya says, Tlas Almen Islay L'Kutshe B'Richu. That the Eibishter has three different worlds. And these three different worlds are the Tachtiyim, Shniyim, and Shlishim, which according to the Baal Shem Tov is Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos. So what do you understand over here from what the Rebbe is saying? When it says Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos, what it really means is there's a world that's described as Eilumis, there's a world that's described as Neshamis, and there's a world that's described as Elokos. We're not just speaking about three things that have no connection at all. Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos. It's also speaking about three worlds. And these three worlds are described, their levels are described as Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos. That's what the Rebbe is saying here. Now here comes the famous pshat that's always quoted in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, and here it's with more details than it's the way it's usually quoted. What's the famous what it always says in the name of the Baal Shem Tov? Tzayar Tasel HaTeva means that it shines. That Tasel HaTeva, what's Teva? Teva is the words of davening. A person should say his words of davening with a geschmack, with a chayis, and bring in life and the shining. The words of davening should shine, right? Or Boyal HaTeva, enter into the word and daven properly with the proper connection. So here it brings this is what the Baal Shem Tov said here. What is the meaning of Tzayar Tasel HaTeva? The Koyal Tevis Atfilo Vatayra. This refers to the words of davening and learning. When a person learns and davens, it should be with the proper, it should shine. The words should be lichtig. What happens then? Miskashrim ha'olemis imalakos al yedei neshamas. The person is saying the words of davening. So what's the words of davening the person says? He's here. He's a physical person, the physical body of a human being here in this world. So that's the Eilumis aspect, that you, with your physical energy, are saying words. That's the Eilumis. And you're investing your energy inside of it, so that's giving chayis into the mitzias of the words that comes from Eilumis. And that is, from where do you get that chayis? From your neshama. So the neshama is connecting the words that come from your guf, from the Eilumis, and it's connecting it to Elokos. So the neshama is sort of that intermediary. The neshama connects the gashmias of the person, or the Eilumis aspect of the words that a person says, with the Elokos of these words of davening. Okay, that's the Vart of the Baal Shem Tov. That's the Tzayar Tasel HaTeva. And more specifically, it's not just stam, the chayis and the light and the shine of the words of davening, but the words of davening have these three floors as well in them. The guf, the Eilumis aspect, the neshama aspect, and the Elokos aspect. Misyachtem means it gets unified. Miskashrim, Misyachtem, it gets unified. Okay, now Mamshech Rabbeinu Azaken, the Alter Rebbe continues to explain here. This will explain better the pshat of the Baal Shem Tov, because again we left it like unexplained when the Baal Shem Tov said Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos, and then he says that the Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos is related to Tlas Almen. What does that mean? How is Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos related to Tlas Almen? And which three worlds? When we say it's related to Tlas Almen, which three worlds? Biyah can't be Biyah. The Shlah said that the three worlds that the Teva corresponds to is Biyah. But that can't be Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos. All of the worlds of Biyah are not Elokos. It's created worlds of Metzias. So when the Baal Shem Tov says Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos, and it corresponds to three worlds, which three worlds are we talking about? So the Alter Rebbe continues and explains this. And according to, as we'll see here, it's going to come out that it actually could fit with the Pshat of the Shlah. The Pshat of the Baal Shem Tov, which is Eilumis, Neshamis, and Elokos, could fit with the pshat of the Shlah that it's Briya Yitzir Asiyah. How's that possible? So let's see. Where am I here? Oh, Mamshich.
It's the opposite. Even if you want to say each one is parallels another Elam. So here we're going Milmaya Lamata Briya Yitzir Asiyah Biyah, and they were saying Elam Neshama.
Okay, but that's just a difference in the order of how it's being counted. But Could you say that Olam corresponds to Asiya and the Shamas correspond? Are these in any way corresponding? L'chayda, it's not corresponding, but we'll see that I will explain that it is. Let's see. So the Alter Rebbe continues and clarifies, what does this mean? What is the statement of the Zohar that is Tlas Almen? When the Zohar says, and this is a Zohar in a different place, it's not over here in Parshas Noach, where in a different place the Zohar says, Tlas Almen Islay L'Kutsh that the Eibishter created or has 3 worlds, Shnei Pirushim. There are 2 Pirushim in the Mefarshim and the Mekubalim. On the Zohar, what was the Zohar referring to? The Mikdash Melech Pirish, the Mikdash Melech says, Sheheim Atzilos Briye Yitzire, that it refers to the 3 worlds of Atzilos Briye Yitzire. So this is different than the Shalah, obviously. The Shalah spoke about Briye Yitzire Asiyah, and the Mikdash Melech says it refers to Atzilos Briye Yitzire. So he skips Asiyah. So the Alter Rebbe says, V'yesh Shloima, we can say, Shezehu Mashakasav Abal Shem Tov. This pshat of the Mikdash Melech, so this explains, this does explain the pshat of the Baal Shem Tov, which is Oilemis, Neshamis, and Elokus. What's the connection? How are Oilemis, Neshamis, and Elokus corresponding to Atzilis and Bria and Yitzira? So the Alter Rebbe says, Oilemis, Haini Yitzira. Oilemis refers to the world of Yitzira. It doesn't explain, but first let's see the words that it says here. Oilemis is Yitzira. And Neshamis, Hainu Bria. And Elokus, Hainu Atzilus. And Elokus refers to the world of Atzilus. What's the pshat? So, why Elokus refers to Atzilus is l'chayre pashut to understand, because that's what the world of Atzilus is. Atzilus is a world of Achdas Hashem. It's godliness. Okay, that's pashut. Why Yitzira refers to the expression of Eilam that the Baal Shem Tov said, because Yitzira is already formulated. It has already Yitzir to it. It's not just in some places in Chassidus, when it speaks about the difference between Bria and Yitzira, the description is that Bria is only a Fshadas HaMetzias. It's sort of the beginning of a potential for existence. It's a Yesh Ma'ayin, but in a Chayma form, in a very potential state. There's no actual formulated being. Yitzira is where there's a tzura, where it's already more formulated, takes on more of its own form. So therefore, Eilamis, when you have a distinct existence of a Welt, that starts in Yitzira. And the Shamas, he says, is in Bria. Shamas is in Bria. What? Raiv of the Neshamas come from Bia. It doesn't say specifically from Bria. Bria is a very high level for Neshamas. If a Neshama comes from Bria, it's a very high Neshama. Most Neshamas from our generations comes from Asiya, Malchus to Asiya. Correct. But Neshamis is from Bria. What's the pshat that Neshamis is from Bria? So what's in general the difference between Elokus and Neshamis? Elokus means godliness. Godliness is not defined. It has no tzir, it has no kalim, it's not contained, it's not limited. What's a Neshama? What's the difference between the expression of Elokus and Neshama? A Neshama has a personality. A Neshama is a metzias. It's like the mashal that Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that there's an av and a ben. And the ben is Yaitse, comes out and is born from the father, even though the whole metzias of the ben is the av, is connected to the av. And even after it becomes independent, he remains connected. And that's his real essence and his real mahus. But nevertheless, a neshama is a koyach of Elokus that comes out into an independent metzias. Take, he's still Elokus, chelik lekami mal mamish. It's not like a creation which is a yesh. But nevertheless, the musig, the idea of a neshama is, the lashon that's brought many times in Chassidus actually is, Elokus kamoy shenasa nivra. It's godliness as it becomes like an entity for itself. Not in the aspect of yeshus chas v'shalom, but in the aspect of that the neshama has its independent personality, its independent existence. That's the idea of neshamas, and therefore it relates to the world of Bria. Because Bria is that world where you have already the beginning of a metzias, of a separate metzias. And I don't want to use the word separate regarding a neshama, but that's l'chayre the pshat why neshamas corresponds to the world of Bria. Okay, so this is what the Alter Rebbe said. Again, so we have over here the pshat of the Shalah, that the Tlas Almen is Bria Yitzira Asiyah, and then you have the pshat of the Mikdash Melech that says that it's Atzilus, Bria, and Yitzira, and that fits more with the Baal Shem Tov, when the Baal Shem Tov said that it's Eilamis, Neshamis, and Elokus, that's Atzilus, Bria, and Yitzira. Charamas Pirish, however, this goes deeper. And this here will connect back to what the Friediger Rebbe says in the Mamer and in the Oster Gimel here. The Ramaz Pirish, he explained what's the taich of Tlas Almen. When the Zayat says Tlas Almen, it actually means something much broader, much more inclusive, from much higher to much lower. Sheheim, what are these Tlas Almen? Ak, or Adam Kadmoin, Adam Kadmon is right the first level, right the beginning, right after Tzimtzum Rishon. You have the Adam Kadmon and Vatzilos and Ubiyah. Those are the Tlas Alman. So in other words, first of all, you see over here right away that the Ramaz begins from much higher. He begins from Adam Kadmon, right after Tzimtzum. And the other thing you see over here is that he puts all three elements of Biyah into one category. Right? All three elements Biyah, that's considered to be the lower worlds. So that's really one world. One's more formulated, one's more defined, but it's one world. Then Atzilus is the middle world, the Shniim, the second world, and Adam Kadmon, that's the highest world. This is the pshat of the Ramaz. So the point of the Ramaz is that when the Zayah is talking about Klas Alman Islay L'Kutshevrichu, these are the three worlds that the Eibishter has. So it's mashman the Zayah Islay that this includes from the highest to the lowest, from all worlds. It could be divided into three levels. And these three levels is what the Ramaz explains over here. Okay. Now the Rebbe adds and explains here. So now this pshat that the Ramaz says, is this connected to any of the pshatim that it said before? Seemingly not. Before we had the pshat that either refers to Biyah, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, those are the three worlds that the Eibishter has, or it refers to Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir. So both of those pshatim are not so inclusive, not so broad, but it doesn't connect to the pshat that the Ramaz says. What the Rebbe says, no, that really there's a way to explain that the pshat of the Shalah, that it refers to Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, is related to the pshat that the Ramaz says over here. So lahoy shepirish zeh masan lepirish hashalah. So this pshat of the Ramaz does fit with the pshat that the Shalah says, the koi al biyah, that it refers to Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. How is that? You just have to reinterpret what the Shalah meant when he said Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. How could the Shalah say that Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, those are the three worlds that Hashem has? Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, those are the lowest aspects of the worlds. And that these are the Tachtim, Shniyim, Shlishim. Elamai, what the Shalah meant when he said Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, he meant the broader understanding of what Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah means. Not the lower worlds of Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. Sometimes in Chassidus, when it speaks about Biyah, it refers to Biyah on a much higher level. Elosh, HaKavonehi, L'Biyah HaKloliyim. It refers to the more general worlds of Biyah that includes from much higher to much lower. Dahainu, what are Biyah Kloliyim? Adam Kadmon, or which is called Eilam Esa Ein Saif. Adam Kadmon is called Eilam Esa Ein Saif. B'chlal, all the levels that exist before Atzilus is usually called Eilam Esa Ein Saif. Okay, so that's Adam Kadmon and other levels. General Adam Kadmon. Atzilus Ubiyah. That's the pshat of Biyah. When the Shalah said Biyah, he didn't mean Biyah in the Eilam Esa Pratiyim. He didn't mean Biyah in relation to our world that the Eibishter created. He meant Biyah in relation to the whole Seder Ishtalshalos. Or really the way this is brought in other places is, it's a little bit different over here, but usually, over here it's different actually, okay, but usually the way this concept, there's the Eilam is Biyah Pratiyim and Eilam is Biyah Kloliyim. What's the difference between them? So usually it says that in relation to the existence of Asiyah, the Nivra, the Yesh HaNivra, or the Yesh of Eilam HaAsiyah, so then you have the Biyah Pratim. You have the Asiyah, and then Yitzirah, and above that Bria. In relation to the existence of Atzilus, Atzilus is not a Yesh HaNivra, but Atzilus is the first world where you have a Elokus that becomes defined in a specific Kalim with specific Sfiris. The Yesh, not the word. The right word is not Yesh, but the Tzir. Maybe Chassidus does say the word Yesh regarding this. The Tzir of Atzilus, that it's divided into Esesphiris Pratium, specific spheres. That's already considered to be the world of Asiyah in relation to Elokus. When you talk about the different levels of Ishtalshalus of Elokus Gufa, going from Elokus being Poshet Betachlis Apshitus, and coming down lower and lower until finally in Atzilus it's a specific tzir of a sphira and all the spheres that there are in Atzilus. So over there regarding that there's also different levels that relate to Bria, Yitzir and Asiyah. And B'chlalis it says that you have the Bria is Adam Kadmon. Then you have Yitzir, which is one of the levels afterwards, after Adam Kadmon, before Atzilus. And then Asiyah is Atzilus. Asiyah refers to Elam Atzilus. That's usually what it says. But over here the Rebbe is teaching it a little bit different. Over here the Rebbe is saying that biyah ha-kloliyim, when the Shalah uses the term biyah, and it means biyah kloliyim, it means from the highest level to the lowest level. Kloliyim means Eilamus Ein Saif, which is Adam Kadmain, and then Atzilus, and then biyah. Biyah refers to the lower worlds. That's what the Shalah meant. Okay.
So where's that Atzilus fit into that picture then?
What do you mean?
What's the Atzilus Klali?
Right. That's my question.
Where's Atzilus Klali? What is that? The essence of
Atzilus Aklali refers to Lifnei Tzimtzum, correct? Yeah, Lifnei Tzimtzum. That's true. That's Atzilus Aklali. The Rebbe says that it's interesting to point out over here. The Rebbe says Adam Kadmain is Eilamis Ha'Ein Saif, which Adam Kadmain is right after Tzimtzum. In the Mamer of the Friediger Rebbe, the Rebbe also quoted before, the Friediger Rebbe uses also the lashon of Eilamis Ha'Ein Saif, but there the lashon is Eilamis Ha'Ein Saif Shelifnei Tzimtzum, which is not so usual. Over here it says Eilamis Ha'Ein Saif refers to Adam Kadmain. Okay, let's just see another few lines over here. Umavai Rabbeinu Azaken, so now the Alter Rebbe says, Shalafi Pirish HaRamaz, that according to the Pshat, the Ramaz says, Osi Shaper Yoser Pirish Baal Shem Tov Nishma Seiden. This actually explains even better what the Baal Shem Tov meant when he divided it into the three levels, Shehem, Gimel, Abechinis, Eilamis, Neshamas, Velakos. That's the three distinct levels of Eilamis, Neshamas, and Elokos. You can see the way the Baal Shem Tov put this, Eilamis, Neshamas, and Elokos, that the Baal Shem Tov wanted to explain Tachtim, Shniim, Shlishim in the broadest sense, that the difference between each floor in the Teva is completely different. The distance that there is from Eilamis to Neshamas, and from Neshamas to Elokos, three completely different floors, three completely different worlds. So as much as you could understand what the Baal Shem Tov said, if you would say that it refers to, like the Pshat of the Mikdash Melech, that it refers to Atzilus, Bria, and Yitzireh, but you could understand it even more so if you take the broader Pshat, that it goes from Adam Kadmain, that's the highest floor, to the middle floor, which is Atzilus, to the lowest floor, which refers to Biyah. Mamish, three distinct worlds altogether. Eilamis, Neshamas, and Elokos. That explains much better what the Baal Shem Tov says. Umaisef, and the Alter Rebbe adds, Vihi haskala muflas. This pshat that the Baal Shem Tov is saying, if you say that the Baal Shem Tov meant the pshat of the Ramaz, so this is a wonderful idea, lahaskel, to understand ma ben atzilus lamasham lamayla matzilus. What is really the difference between the world of Atzilus and what's above Atzilus? Okay, the same difference, the same explanation that explains the difference between Neshamas and Elokos, that's the difference between the world of Atzilus and what's above Atzilus. Okay, so the Rebbe is going to explain this over here, but let me just point out an interesting thing that you see over here. The difference between the Mikdash Melech and the Ramaz, besides the fact that the Ramaz's pshat is much broader, it starts from much higher and it ends up much lower, and the Mikdash Melech is much narrower. He's speaking just about the three worlds of Atzilus, Bria, and Yitzireh. There's also an afgemina how you define the world of Atzilus. According to the Mikdash Melech's pshat, Atzilus is Elokos. Neshamas goes where? On the world of Bria. According to the pshat of the Ramaz, Atzilus is Neshamas. Elokos refers to Eilamis Ha'Ein Saif, that's higher than Atzilus. What's the world of Atzilus? Atzilus is the world of Neshamas. And that is the pshat that Alter Rebbe finally accepts and explains, that this explains really what the Baal Shem Tov meant, that Atzilus is the world of Neshamas, not the world of Elokos. And not only that, the Alter Rebbe added, by defining the world of Atzilus as the world of Neshamas and not the world of Elokos, that actually explains the difference. It's a haskala muflas, he says. This explains the difference between what's Lamayla Atzilus and Atzilus. Lamayla Atzilus is Elokos, and Atzilus is Neshamas. So what's this haskala muflas? What's this wonderful idea that the Baal Shem Tov is explaining over here? So okay, we don't really have the time to delve into this today, but basically there's the nakuda that the Rebbe wants to explain over here, the difference between what exists before Atzilus and Atzilus. If Atzilus is also Elokos, we know Atzilus is a world of Gatlachkeit. Atzilus is a world of Achdas Hashem. There is no inyan of creation in Atzilus. So if so, the question ultimately is, what's really the difference between Atzilus and before Atzilus? Bishleim, if you're talking about, if you ask the question, what's the difference between before Tzimtzum and after Tzimtzum? So that we understand, we know the Asberin that Chassidus says, what Tzimtzum is, Tzimtzum Arishain, it's a Siluk, and there's a huge difference between before Tzimtzum and after Tzimtzum. But the difference between the Eilamis that are before Atzilus and after Atzilus, they're already after Tzimtzum. So what's really the big difference between them? So over here, the Alter Rebbe is saying that this is the Haskalah Muflas to understand when the Baal Shem Tov says that the Eilamis Ein Sof before Atzilus are defined as a Lakus, and the world of Atzilus is defined as Neshamis. That gives you an idea of what's the difference between the Eilamis before Atzilus and the world of Atzilus. Okay, so stay tuned for the rest of the story. The Mamer of Basi Ligani, Tafshin Chav Gimel, on page Yud Gimel, where we are holding towards the top of the page. Let's see, where we're holding here. I think we're going to start again from the third line from the top of the page because we're mamish in the middle of an inyan. So this is all bringing the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, as the Rebbe always would do in the Mamer of Basi Ligani, bring the Torah of all the Rabbeim. So here the Rebbe brings the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov that says that when it's in the Teva, Tachtiyim, Shniyim, Shlishim, the three floors in the Teva refers to three different worlds, Beruchnius. And through Tzayar Tasel Teva, you make a window or a light or a shining. The Teva, the idea is that you're going to connect all these worlds together. So what are the three worlds? So in the last point here, according to the Ramaz, he says that the three worlds are Eilamis Ein Sof, the worlds that are higher than Atzilus, and therefore they're referred to as the worlds of Ein Sof, then the world of Atzilus, and then Biyah, the three lower worlds. Those are the three worlds of Tachtiyim, Shniyim, and Shlishim. Okay, so let's continue inside again. The Alter Rebbe explains, Shalafi Pirish Ramaz. According to the Pshat, Ramaz says, Asi Shaper Yaiser. So this explains even better what it means, Pirish what the Baal Shem Tov meant in his Pshat. Pirish Baal Shem Tov. Sheheim Gimel HaBechinis, it refers to the three levels, Eilamis, Neshamis, Velakos, which would mean that Biyah is Eilamis, Atzilus is Neshamis, and the worlds that are higher than Atzilus is Velakos. Umaisif, and he adds there, Vihi Haskalah Muflas. This is a wondrous idea, Lahaskel, to understand, Ma ben Atzilus, Lamashalamai lam Atzilus. What is the difference between the world of Atzilus and what's higher than Atzilus? Shazehu, on page Yud Gimel, towards the top of the page. Shazehu inyan ha'hefresh bein neshamas le'elokos. Similar to the explanation of what the difference is between neshamas and elokos, that also explains the difference between Atzilus and what's above Atzilus. Okay, so as I began explaining last time, what's this Haskalah Muflas here? This unusual lashon, obviously. It's a wondrous idea. Because Bepashtos, since Atzilus is a place which is pure godliness, the worlds that are higher than Atzilus are also pure godliness. So what's really the difference between them? Why are we dividing higher than Atzilus and Atzilus as two completely different worlds? And in the Teva, this is the Shniyim, and this is the Shlishim. What's the big difference between them? But if you define Atzilus as Neshamis, and what's higher than Atzilus as Elokos, that gives you an idea to understand the difference between them. So what's this? What's the understanding of this? What's the pshat? So he explains. Key reason is as follows: Hanashamis nimshachim mikelim datzilus. The neshamas, what's the source of the neshamas? They come from kelim datzilus. Sh'im eyaisam gam ken elokos. Even though the kelim of atzilus are also godliness, as it says in the Zayah, Iu v'garmoi chad, the Eibishter, the revelation of the Eibishter, and Garmoi, which are the Kalim and Atzilus, are Chad, are one. There are different Pirushim what Garmoi means, but this is the Pshat that's always brought in Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe explains this in Tanya. Garmoi refers to the Kalim of Atzilus. So the Kalim of Atzilus and the Eibishter are all one. Ach, im kolzet, nevertheless, einan daimim laha'eris shehem elakus mamish. You can't compare the Kalim of Atzilus and its oneness with the Eibishter to the Eiris that there are in Atzilus and its oneness with the Eibishter. Okay, so what's the pshat in this? What is he saying here? First of all, what does this mean that Iyu v'garmoi chad, that the Kalim are one with the Eibishter? First of all, when it says there chad with what? Chad with the Eibishter means the Eibishter himself has no tzir b'chlal. The Eibishter is pashat b'tachlis apshitis. There's no descriptions of chesed, gvuret, teferes, or any of the spheres. What are the Kalim? The whole idea of Kalim is limited and defined Kalim. The word Kalim means contained, limited. And what are we saying over here? That the spheres of Atzilus, which are defined, is one with the Eibishter, which is Pashat B'tachlis Apshitis, which has no description at all. That's really what it means. In other words, there's two different points here. One point is that the Kalim of Atzilus are not a creation. They're not a yesh. Not a creation. The Eibishter reveals himself. The Eibishter can reveal himself in any way. A human being is limited how far his revelation can go. A human being can only reveal himself as far as his koyach extends. I mean, l'mashal seichel. If a person has the koyach to be meirid a dvar seichel, to bring down a dvar seichel to someone that's very low, like it says by Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech is so wise. He's able to reveal his ideas to another world, lower. But as low as it's going to go, it's all going to have to be somehow connected to that chachma originally, where it comes from. The Eibishter has the koyach to reveal himself in things and in matters that are completely not associated to him. Does Chesed have any association with the Eibishter himself? Is Chesed in any way expressed who the Eibishter himself is? The Eibishter is Pashat, is not none of these descriptions. So Chesed is the lowest thing. It's like by a person comparing Chachmeh to Offer, to the lowest element. There's no connection b'chlal. And by the Eibishter, the distance that there is from Chesed to who the Eibishter is, Pashat, before this, that seer is much further. But nevertheless, the Eibishter reveals himself through Chesed as well. So what's the Metzias of Chesed? Or I'm just saying Chesed, but it's all the Kalim of Atzilus. What is their Metzias? It's godliness. That's what it is. But at the end of the day, though, when he says here, the word means something else. That's not what it means. What it means is, but soft. What are these Kalim? These Kalim are limited, defined expressions of godliness. Who's the Eibishter himself? Ihu. Ihu is above that. There's no description. So the Zohar comes in his Machadish and tells you that in Atzilus, even the Kalim that l'chayra are limited and defined, they are chad. They're completely unified. They sense that what are they really? They sense that they're just an expression of the Eibishter himself that's above this definition. They're connected. They feel their source. So therefore, what is their true Metzias? The true Metzias, even of the Kalim themselves, is not the inyan of Chesed. It's not that, Chesed is a big Maile, Chesed is a big Shleimos, and therefore Chesed of Atzilus feels that this is what I am, this is it, it's all about Chesed, and then Gvura feels that it's all about Gvura. That's not, there's no such a kind of a hergish in the world of Atzilus. In Atzilus, even the world of Chesed, the Sphira, the Keli of Chesed itself, is Chad, senses the truth of godliness. And what's the truth of godliness? No Chesed, no description of anything. That's the idea of Iva Garmoy Chad. Okay, but then the Rebbe adds, even though Zohar says Iva Garmoy Chad, but as we know, that same Zohar says first Iva Chayoy Chad. Then it says Iva Garmoy Chad. And the question Chassidus is always asked, and I think it could be the Alter Rebbe indicates this also in Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about this in the Geras HaKodesh, Simachov. Why doesn't the Zohar say it together? Iu V'chayoy v'garmoy chad. What is chayoy? Chayoy is the oiris of Atzilus. Atzilus is made up of two parts. There's the oiris of Atzilus and there's the kalim of Atzilus. Why doesn't it say that it's all one? That the kalim and the oiris are all one with the Eibishter. Since the achtus of the Eibishter, the truth of the essence of the Eibishter, which is not defined in any way, is sensed in the world of Atzilus, it should have said it all as one. So therefore the Rebbe is saying over here, because it says Iva Garmoy Chad separately, Achim Kol Zeh, you can't compare the oneness of the Kalim to Ihu with the Eibishter, that's above these Kalim, to the oneness of the Eiris with the Eibishter. Because the Eiris of Atzilus do not have that type of Atzir the way the Kalim do. So the fact that in the Eiris, it's the truth of the Eibishter is sensed over there is in a much more powerful way. It's in a much more direct way. It's without the tzir of Kalim at all. As much as Kalim sense their source, that they're one with Sof, what are the mitzias of Kalim? Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, there is a certain tzir here. Mashenkin and Eiris, it's above that tzir. So therefore, it's the oneness with the Eibishter himself that's undefined is much more powerful.
Isn't oneness one of those things which either black and white, it either is or
No, lavdafka. completely lavdafka. Just like you understand regarding the achdus that there is in this world. You can see so many different levels of achdus. You have a achdus where people collaborate. You have a achdus where people feel the same. You have a achdus to the point where people like are mamish one. Like Chassidus speaks about all these different types of achdus, levels of achdus. You have the achdus, l'mashal, of achim, brothers. Then you have the achdus of the brothers. Alter Rebbe describes in Tanya that the achdus of Yidden is really like the children before they're born. Bim maya cha'av, and over there it's all one mitzias in the Father. There's a lot of different levels of achdus, right? So, not that any of these analogies I just gave are meduyik of what he's saying here, but just I'm saying that the concept of achdus, you have many different levels. So he's saying the achdus of the kelim of Atzilus with the Eibishter is not to the same degree as the achdus of the Eiris. They are elakus mamish. Okay, but
yesterday,
yeah, it speaks about the subject.
Barichas
Gedayla.
Wow.
Okay, I'll take a look. Shmois Chav Beis. Here you got it. Okay, but now here the Rebbe adds another point that really v'zehu atzmai hahefresh. This itself is the difference between Atzilos shehu b'chinas kelim. Really, the world of Atzilus in general, even though we just said here that the world of Atzilus is comprised of Eiris and Kelim, but really the world of Atzilus in general, Shuhu b'chinas Kelim. The whole world of Atzilus is b'chinas Kelim. What that means is, even the Eiris of Atzilus are Eiris that are going to be mislabish in Kelim. They're Eiris that have a connection to Kelim. They're not the pure Eiris higher than Atzilus. Okay, so they already have a connection to Kelim, so therefore the world of Atzilus b'chalal is called Kelim. And the worlds of Ein Sof that are higher than Atzilus, sheheim l'mayla mepchinas kelim d'Atzilus, they are removed of the whole idea of kelim. They're higher than kelim d'Atzilus. That's why that's referred to as lakus. In other words, this is really the difference between the shamis and a lakus. A lakus means godliness. The expression of a lakus in Chassidus, whenever you say the word a lakus all the time, what is that? That's the Eibishter which is undefined. The Eibush cannot be described in any way. That's the Indian of Holocaust. There's no Kalim. Atzilus, what's the Chiddush of the world of Atzilus? It's also godliness. But Atzilus is where the Eibush brought himself down, was mitzamtzim himself into a mitzias of Kalim, which could be defined. Elamai, but you always have to remember, it's still all Holocaust, it's still all godliness. It's not the Eibush creating something other than him. Adarabah, it's the koyach that the Eibishter has to bring himself down and express himself even in something which is so low. Legabe the Eibishter himself. It's still all godliness, but it's a mitzias of Kalim. So therefore, the way to describe Atzilus is neshamas. I think I mentioned last time, the idea of a neshama is, what's the difference between the expression of neshama or expression of Holocaust? Neshama means a defined being. That's what a neshama is, because a neshama has a personality, a neshama has kaiches. That's the title of the word neshama. Holocaust is godliness. Godliness is undefined. That's the Eibishter before there's any Gedarim. That's Eilam Ein Sof. So Gam Yesh Loimar, also we could say, this is all quoting there from what the Alter Rebbe explained, this word of the Baal Shem Tov, Ha'hefresh bein beis b'chinas Elul, so then that comes out that really the difference between the two levels. In other words, the world of Atzilus and Eilam Ein Sof that are higher than Atzilus, Ke'inyan ha'hefresh, just like the explanation of the difference, ben ha'yichod de'iyu v'chayoyichad. What is the level of unity when we say Iyu v'chayoyichad, the unity of the Eibishter with the Eiris of Atzilus, ben hayichad Iyu v'garmoyichad, and the yichad of the Eibishter with garmoyi. So we do say chad regarding both of them, but the chad, the extent of the chad regarding the kelim, and the extent of chad regarding the Eiris is not exactly the same. And that's really the difference between Atzilus and what's higher than Atzilus. Because as I said, Atzilus is a world of Kelim. Even the Eiris of Atzilus are potentially connected to Kelim. Their Inyan is to come into Kelim. Okay, so that's all Benigay to Eilam Ein Sof and Atzilus. Now, Lamata Mizeh, but then... What's the higher than Eilam Ein Sof?
There is.
The reason why I'm asking that, one second, I hear what you're saying, but the reason why I'm asking that is for two reasons. First of all, this Inyan that Rebbe speaks about here, that Atzilus, what defines the world of Atzilus is the fact that Atzilus has Kalim, so in Atzilus it says that higher than Atzilus, there's no Metzias of Kalim. The Inyan of Kalim begins in the world of Atzilus, generally speaking. Higher than Atzilus, there's no inyan of Kalim. Higher than Atzilus, over there, Akudim, the Kudim L'Mashal. Chassidus speaks about the fact that it's all, everything is Akudim, everything is bound up together as one. Or Nekudim means that the Eiris are there as Nekudis. It's not defined, it's not. Okay, but there's another point I wanted to say. When the Rabbi here says Eilam Ein Sof, I think I touched upon this before. What is Eilam Ein Sof referring to here? In the Lashon that the Rebbe is saying here, Eilam Ein Sof refers to many, many different levels. Eilam Ein Sof is Lashon Rabbim, Eilam Eis. What do they refer to? All those levels higher than Atzilus that you learn about in Chassidus. Keser, Akudim, Nekudim, Brudim. Here he mentions Adam Kadmai, which is the level right after Tzimtzum. That's also part of Eilam Ein Sof. But the Emes is even more than that. I mentioned already in the Lashon, the Friedrich Rebbe's Mamer, he says Eilam Ein Sof Shulufnei Tzimtzum. That Eilam Ein Sof even includes various revelations that are even before Tzimtzum. And Chassidus it speaks about even before Tzimtzum, there's the concept of Sfiris Ein Kates or Daliyas HaRatzon. Where the Eibishter has the desire to create, that's already Lifnei at Tzimtzum. So there's an inyan of Eilam Ein Sof even Lifnei at Tzimtzum. Right? As a Sfiris like Nuzes, we learned about that last year also. Akopana, I'm just saying Eilam Ein Sof is a very, very broad, a lot of different elements that are included in that. In the actual pshat of what the Rebbe is saying here, it doesn't seem like the Rebbe is referring to Eilam Ein Sof Shelufnei at Tzimtzum. I think I mentioned this because if so, what's this whole pilpul over here? We're trying to explain the difference between Eilam Ein Sof and Atzilus. If you're talking about Lifnei at Tzimtzum and after Tzimtzum, the Tzimtzum is b'derech siluk. The difference is very simple. There's no big pulpulim about it. Over here, he's speaking about Eilam Ein Sof that's after Tzimtzum, and you compare that to the world of Atzilus. They're both a lakus. So the question becomes, what's the difference between them? Why are we separating them into two separate worlds? And that's what he's mechadish here, that the world of Atzilus, even though it seems like the world of Atzilus has in it Eiris and Kalim, but the emes is, the world of Atzilus in general is described as the world of the Neshamas, because even the Eiris of Atzilus are there connected to the Metzias of Kalim. When the Rebbe said the Mamer, the Lashon that the Rebbe used was that Atzilus is a place where it's the Yechilis of Kalim. It's a Kenzain Kalim. Even the Eiris are already a level of light that is measured to some degree. It could come into Kalim. The very fact that it will come into Kalim means it's a level of Eiris that's connected to Kalim. That describes Atzilus. Eilam Ein Sof Shelufnei Atzilus, after Tzimtzum, that's a Lukos. That's a level of revelation which is undefined, which has no Kalim. Which Chassidus explains, right? Keser is Ratzon. The Ratzon of a person has no Kalim. Any other koyach of a person has a keli. The keli for seichel is in your moyach. The keli of midis is in your heart. Every koyach of a person has a keli. What doesn't have a keli in the person? Ratzon. Ratzon has no keli. Where's your ratzon? The koyach ratzon is in your head, it's in your feet, it's in your hands, it's nowhere. The koyach ratzon is shaylit over the entire person. It activates any koyach and it has no keli b'chlal. That's the mashal, that's the concept of the Eiris that exists before Atzilus.
So then Atzilus does not come from the lowest level of the Eilam Ein Sof that's before Atzilus. You say that Biyah comes from the lowest level.
In this sense, it says in Chassidus that in this sense, Chassidus is considered to be like a yesh ma'ayin. The lashon that it says a chachma ma'ayin tamotzei, comparing the Eiris of Atzilus to what's before Atzilus, it's like a yesh ma'ayin. It's a yesh of a tzir of chachma and the kalim. It's like a similar to yesh ma'ayin. There's a big discussion in Chassidus about this, whether Atzilus is yesh ma'ayin or it's naya. But in this sense, it's like a yesh ma'ayin. It's a whole new world, a whole new thing of kalim. But then what's below this? Hey, Eilam is biyah. The worlds of biyah, shehem nivraim. The world of biyah is creations. The hayin nefradim, mamish. The idea of a nivra is he's separated. That's the real description of a nivra. The nivra is not just something that exists, something that here is. It's an existence. The kalim of Atzilus, are also in existence. Well, that's not only the word. I'm trying to say something else. The difference, usually we think that the difference between the Nevraim of Biyah and the existence of the Kalim of Atzilus, what's the difference between them? Why do we define this as a lower world, this is Nevraim, and why is Atzilus not Nevraim? Why is Atzilus godliness? So usually the way we define it is because, what do you mean? The Nevraim of the world of Bria, Yitzir and Asiyah are much lower. They're much further from the Eibusha, so to speak. They're such low things, so therefore, that's a creation. Shenkeng, Chesed, or whatever other Kalim you have in Atzilus, they're much higher, they're much more spiritual, they're much more connected to the Eibishter, they're much closer to who the Eibishter is. So therefore, they're godliness. That's usually the way we think of this. But the emphasis is that Hezber is Pashat not true. Why? Because the emes is that even chesed, gvura, whatever tzir there is in Atzilus, is be'ein areich to the Eibishter. As much as it's true that the Nevrayim, the Yesh of the world, is be'ein areich to who the Eibishter is, has no connection to him, so too the existence of the Kalim of Atzilus have no connection to the Eibishter is. All these tziyurim by the Eibishter are not tifis makim b'chlal. So what is the difference between Atzilus and Bria? Why is Atzilus Elokos and why is Bria not Elokos? The answer is not because of how far it is. They're both far. It's just one is nifred and one is not nifred. The Eibishter will express himself or sort of give himself out in two different ways. One is by him extending himself and him coming into these limited kalim, expressing himself through these limited ways. And another is by creating something that's disconnected of him, creating a world that's detached of him, a nivra, to create something that's unassociated with him. It's just two different ways of how the Eibishter is mashpia. So one is Elokos, one is the Eibishter extending himself, and the other is nifrat, separated. That's the Ikon Akudah here. I don't know if we have a mashal for this in this world. I mean, the only mashal that I saw that's brought to explain this kind of a thing is when a person is mashpia and he's mashpia in a place which is not him, but you have usually a person's mashpia something in a place that's not him, so it becomes disconnected from him. Even a person's mashpia, you can be mashpia dvar seichel, you can be mashpia all kinds of things, but usually the hashpah that you give it comes into the world and it becomes detached from you. That's usually a hashpah. But the koyach hayilada, when a person gives birth to a child, the emes ha'inyan of the koyach hayilada is that it's you, it's the muhus of the father, it's the muhus of the parent that's being born and created in the mitzias of a child. So really that child is you. So even though it's sort of detached of you, but a child is not nifrat. A child is really just you being extended in an independent mitzias. So that's sort of a mashal to understand what the difference between Atzilus and Bria is. Atzilus is also be'en arech to the Eibishter himself, but it's the Eibishter revealing himself in these low things. The Eibishter chooses to reveal himself through these low things. Mashenken Bria is not him revealing himself. Adarabah, the Eibishter is blocking himself, and the Eibishter is creating a new mitzias which is not him. Nifrat, that's the idea of Bria. Okay. No, we have another 2 minutes, so we can't cut short over here. So let's go a little weiter. So now, connecting this back to the Mamer, the Friedige Rebbe. The Mamer, the Friedige Rebbe, he divides all these elements that the Baal Shem Tov speaks about. The Baal Shem Tov divides it all in the lashon of the pasuk Tachtim, Shnim, Shlishim into 3. But the Friedige Rebbe divides it into 2. There's Eilam Ein Seif, Eilam Atzilus, and he puts Eilam Ein Seif and Eilam Atzilus all in one category, and then Eilam is Biyah, and then the worlds of Biyah. So it's sort of a question: why does the Friedige Rebbe do this? If the Baal Shem Tov explained that there's a haskalah muflas to explain and understand the difference between Eilam Ein Seif and Atzilus, that it's not exactly the same. Atzilus is a world where the Iker is the Kalim. Higher than Atzilus is Ein Seif, it's Eiris. And then you have the worlds of Biyah, which are Nifrat. So why is the Friedige Rebbe dividing it into 2 categories? So, beprotius, if you want to divide it further, beprotius yesh, chiluk ben Eilam Ein Seif, Eilam Atzilus gufa. As we explained, there is a difference between Eilam Ein Seif and the world of Atzilus. She'elam Ein Seif, heim, elokos, mamish. There, it's absolute godliness. There's nothing defined. There's no kalim. Mashenken Eilam Atzilus, shebo yochel liyos, and v'yeshnai inyan shel kalim. So this is the lashon that the Rebbe said. Yochel liyos v'yeshnai. See, in Atzilus, even the Eiris that are still not yet kalim, but the whole existence of the world of Atzilus, even the Eiris are potentially there. Eira has a connection to the mitzias of kalim. And there's actually the kalim there. Elo, however, even in the world of Atzilus, the world of Atzilus is very far from the Eilam Ein Seif that are before Atzilus, but nevertheless, Ela shezehu ba'ifin she'elokos ba b'tzimtzum v'eslapshus ad sheyachal iskashem kalim. It's not the Eibishter creating something that's not him. Adarabah, the whole idea of Atzilus, the chiddush of Atzilus is that the Eibishter is able to lower himself down into these places of Atzilus, of Kalim. Right? That's the title of the word Atzilus. Atzilus means revelation. It's just like it says when Moshe Rabbeinu brought down his nevuah, Vayatzal min haruach. He brought down his nevuah to the other people that got the nevuah from him. So Moshe Rabbeinu is lowering himself down. He's not separating himself. Adarabah, he's lowering himself down into these things. It's a tzimtzum, but the Eibishter is there. It's all Elokus. Well, kanal, as we said before, shachiluk ben olam es ein sof lo'olam atzilos. The difference between these two worlds is only hachiluk ben hayichud v'chayoychad ben hayichud v'gamoychad. The av sheb'shneim hu chad. Both of them are all chad. They're one with the Eibishter. And like I said before, the idea of one with the Eibishter means one with the Eibishter that's higher than any description. One with the ihu. But there's still a difference between them because this is Kalim being one with the Eibishter, and this is the Otis being one with the Eibishter. Okay, Mashenkin Biyah is a different story. Biyah is Nifradim. Okay, so the Rebbe is going to explain here. Okay, we'll continue with Shem tomorrow. That in this sense, Atzilus and Eilam Ein Sof fall into one category because they're both Chad. On the other hand, Biyah is Nifrad, is separated from the Eibishter.
So it says in some of that even the Kalim have a sharpness to not only to those, in other words, it says the Oros have the sharpness to Tzuras Ein Gates, and the Kalim have a sharpness to Shimon after the Tzimtzum, then he says even before the Tzimtzum, even
right.
Before the Tzimtzum.
Okay, yeah, there's the different asbeirim. Yeah, the difference between the yichud of iver chayechad and iver gamoyechad, not the same kind of. In other words, even the level of ihu is not the same ihu, not the same darga of ihu as well. Okay, there's so much about this in Chassidus.